Holt, and this is Dateline.
As a result of World War I, there was a lot of political confusion. Many leftist groups in Europe and America opposed the war. They viewed the war as an imperialist struggle for a gain in power and profit, which left the working class to struggle. However, following America's entrance into the war in April 1917, opposition to the war was no longer tolerated. President Woodrow Wilson declared this in his Flag Day address on June 14, 1917, following the next day when he signed the Espionage Act, setting a fine of $10,000 and a prison sentence of up to 20 years for anyone who aided the enemy or encouraged disloyalty in the armed forces. A year later, Congress passed the Sedition Act, which was similar to the Espionage Act, just in a harsher, more austere manner. This made it so that no American was allowed to utter, print, write, or publish disloyal, profane, scurrilous, or abusive language against the government or the Constitution. Immigrants from Southern and Eastern Europe, which included Italian immigrants, were a main suspect group. Beginning in 1880, Italian immigrants had flooded into the country. From 1900 to 1920, about 3 million immigrants migrated to the United States. Most of these immigrants were unskilled and semi-skilled laborers. A lot of them joined groups devoted to social revolution and overthrowing the capitalist system, considering that they were the working class and had, as previously stated, viewed war as an imperialist struggle. Succeeding the war was the Red Scare, a period of panic over the threat of communists and anarchists. 4 million workers went on a strike in 1919, the first year after the war ended. Communist revolution had previously occurred in Russia in 1917, and many Americans dreaded that a similar revolution would transpire in the United States. Anarchist groups in the U.S. that strongly opposed the war had begun a series of terrorist acts after the war. In April 1919, mail bombs were sent to important politicians and to wealthy, powerful businessmen. The targets included Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer, J.P. Morgan, and John D. Rockefeller. No one was injured, but this brought about a surge of anger and hatred against communists, radicals, and foreigners. The dread intensified in June when 7 bombs went off in 7 different cities. These bombs were delivered by hand to the doors of the intended victims. However, these bombs were much more powerful than the previous set of bombs. Once again, none of the intended victims were injured, but several bystanders were killed. Copies of a flyer were found at every site, printed on a slip of pink paper signed, "The Anarchist Fighters."
Sacco and Vanzetti were members of the feared and despised anarchist group. They came to the United States from Italy in 1908 and settled in Massachusetts. Both of them were found to be subscribed to Gallieni's radical newspaper. Both were passionate followers of Gallieni and believed in the principles of the anarchist movement. According to Sacco, anarchism meant no government, no police, no judges, no bosses, no authority. The people own everything. Distribute by needs, equality, justice, and comradeship. As anarchists, Sacco and Vanzetti had opposed the war. They had fled to Mexico in 1917 to avoid registering for the draft. When they returned to Massachusetts, but ended up getting caught in the Red Scare. Several of their friends and fellow anarchists had already been arrested and were being deported. This piece of their background heavily influenced the outcome of their case.
The trial began in May 1921 and lasted nearly 7 weeks. 59 total witnesses testified for the prosecution, and 99 total witnesses who testified for the defendants. Similar to all other criminal cases, the prosecution had to carry the weight of proving the men guilty. The problem was simple. Were Sacco and Vanzetti the men who had robbed and killed the paymaster and the guard, or were they not? But a mass of conflicting evidence was presented to the court.
Sacco claimed to have taken off work to travel to Boston to request a passport from the Italian consulate. Several witnesses testified that they saw Sacco traveling to Boston or in Boston.
I saw him that evening of April 15, 1920. I was at the Italian consulate waiting to report the birth of my son, who I had just given birth to, a few days prior, and I saw him. Sacco, I'm not exactly sure what he was doing there, but he was certainly there.
Sacco offered the photo he tried to use for the passport.
I had declared that the reason for rejecting the photograph was its considerable dimensions, which rendered it notable. Moreover, while conversing about the image with fellow consulate members, I distinctly noticed the date displayed on a sizable calendar. I testified all of this, but I guess it wasn't taken into much consideration.
There were 7 eyewitnesses: Andrews, Tracy, Heron, Pelser, Splain, Devlin, and Goodridge. All of them placed Sacco in or near Braintree. They all claimed the perpetrator looked like Sacco, but couldn't make a positive ID. In court, the defense fired back at this. Out of all 7 witnesses, none of them was at any time certain of the identification. The witnesses were not required to pick Sacco out of a lineup. Presented in front of the Lowell Committee, the police chief of South Braintree expressed shock that the eyewitnesses had much more certainty of their identifications in the trial compared to the preliminary just the previous year. Vanzetti's alibi was a lot less clear. He claimed that he was peddling fish the same day the crime occurred. This time, prosecution had only 4 witnesses: Faulkner, Dolbear, Lavangi, and Reed. All of them placed Vanzetti near the scene of the crime. These testimonies were more clear than those of Sacco's. Lavangi testified that he saw him driving a car near the South Braintree station shortly after he heard shots fired.
With Lavangi, he turned to me just a couple of minutes after the shooting and claimed that it would be hard to identify the man he had seen driving the car. This goes against his own testimony.
Lavangi told me he never saw anyone.
Lavangi told me that the driver had light hair, but in all the pictures and even in person, his hair was dark.
One big problem that caused a turning point in this case was that they found that the 2 men had lied to the police. Sacco had lied about his whereabouts. He had denied knowing Boda and denied holding anarchist or radical beliefs. Sacco's explanation for having the gun was that the time of his arrest was coincidental. However, the prosecutors did not believe this and said these were lies that showed consciousness and guilt. The reason Sacco lied at his initial police interview was that he feared if he told the truth about his actual beliefs or admitted knowing radical friends, he would get deported. Regarding his firearms, his friends' whereabouts, and his motivation for visiting Bridgewater on May 5th, Vanzetti told lies. Vanzetti's explanation for his presence in Bridgewater was feeble. Vanzetti was thought to have most likely gone to Bridgewater to obtain Boda's vehicle, the Overland, in order to carry out another heist. Vanzetti testified that he told some lies when initially questioned, since the country was facing the Red Scare, and he was scared for himself and his friends. Not only did the alibis play a major role in this hearing, but so did the forensics of it. To this day, the forensics of the case are still unclear. The 2 guns owned by Sacco and Vanzetti were key pieces of evidence in this case.
There were a lot of different stories surrounding Vanzetti's revolver. The gun found on Vanzetti was a .38 Harrington and Richardson revolver. The prosecution had claimed that he had stolen the gun from Bernadelli, the guard's gun. It was said that the gun that Vanzetti claimed to own had a repaired hammer that Bernadelli's gun also had. However, Vanzetti himself had 2 different stories when it came to how he received the gun. The first story went that he had gotten the gun from his friend Falzini months in advance. Falzini had later testified that this was true. The other story, however, at the time of his arrest, he claimed to have bought it from a store that he couldn't recall the name of. He had even lied about how much he had paid for the gun and where the bullets came from. In 1997, the evidence was re-examined when police files were made public. They had shown that the gun couldn't have been taken off of Bernadelli because it had different serial number and wasn't even the same caliber. Bernadelli's being a .32 caliber, the one found at Vanzetti was a .38. A different ballistics test in '61 proved that the bullet found in the body of Bernadelli was from Sacco's gun. Police believe people believe that the police planted it because it didn't match the other bullets in his body.
All this gun confusion is too much. I saw Vanzetti and he was a driver. No doubt about it.
Vanzetti never gained his driver's license. He never even learned how to drive.
The most fatal bullet, which was the third bullet fired at Bernadelli, came from the Colt pistol, or Sacco's gun. 2 years following this, I signed a written statement confirmed by oath by oath stating that this wasn't fired by Sacco's gun, and I stand by that.
The last major piece of evidence was the cap. The day after the murders, a gray cloth cap with a torn lining was found near Bernardelli's body. The prosecution argued it was Sacco's hat. Testimony claimed Sacco had hung up his cap at a nail at work, which the nail created a tear in the hat. The cap, however, was not the same size as any of the other caps found in Sacco's home. The prosecution asked him to try it on the hat. He said it was too small, but the prosecution maintained that it fit.
1927. I say that Sacco had torn the cap's lining to see if there was anything that can help us find any identification. That's how the rip got there.
With all of this being said, Sacco and Vanzetti were eventually convicted of first-degree murder and were sentenced to death by electric chair on August 23, 1927. The sentencing, however, was found to be quite unfair. It was believed that Judge Thayer himself had his prejudice against anarchists, which is what led them to being sentenced to death, not because of anything presented in the trial. Thayer had openly expressed his hatred towards immigrants and political radicals, even being known for this. This is what led many people to believe that this case was unfair. So, back to the reason we are here today. Are Sacco and Vanzetti innocent or guilty? After compiling all of the evidence and pieces of the trial, we can infer that these men were the scapegoats for this crime that they did not commit. From the evidence that proved against them committing the crime to an openly biased judge, this case was most certainly unfair and deserved the attention it gained. These men deserve justice, which they will never be able to physically receive.
Nicholas Sacco, have you anything to say why sentence of death should not be passed upon you?
Yes, sir, I am no orator. After 7 years prosecuting, they still consider us guilty. And these gentle people here are arrayed with us in this court today. I know the sentence will be between two classes, the oppressed class and the rich class, and there will always be collision between one and the other. We fraternize the people with the books, with the literature. You persecute the people, tyrannize them, and kill them. We try the education of people always. You try to put a path between us and some other nationality that hates each other. This is why I am here today on this bench, for having been of the oppressed class. Well, you are the oppressor. As I said before, Judge Thayer know all my life, and he know that I am never guilty, never, not yesterday, nor today, nor forever.
Bartholomew Vanzetti, have you anything to say why sentence of death should not be passed upon you?
Yes, what I say is that I am innocent, not only of the Braintree crime, but also of the Bridgewater crime. That I am not only innocent of these two crimes, but in all my life I have never stolen, and I have never killed, and I have never spilled blood. That is what I want to say, and it is not all. Not only am I innocent of these two crimes, not only in my life I have never stolen, never killed, never spilled blood, but I have struggled all my life since I began to reason, to eliminate crime from the earth. Now, I should say that I am not only innocent of all these things. Not only have I never committed a real crime in my life, though some sins, but not crimes. Not only have I struggled all my life to eliminate crimes, the crimes that the official law and the moral law condemns, but also the crime that the moral law and the official law sanction and sanctify. The exploitation and the oppression of the man by the man. And if there is a reason why I am here as a guilty man, if there is a reason why you in a few minutes can doom me, it is this reason and none else. This is what I say. I would not wish to a dog or to a snake, to the lowest and misfortunate creature of the earth. I would not wish to any of them what I have had to suffer for the things I am not guilty of. I am suffering because I am a radical, and indeed I am a radical. I have suffered because I am an Italian, and indeed I am an Italian. I have suffered more for my family and for my beloved than for myself. But I'm so convinced to be right that you can only kill me once. But if you could execute me 2 times, and if I could be reborn 2 other times, I would live again to do what I have done already. I have finished. Thank you.
Can we please film it like
No.
It's on whenever.
I was with the Benji. Wait, hold on. I'm dyslexic.
Vanzetti never gained his driver's license. He didn't even know how to drive. We do.
Can we go to Indian?